A very warm welcome to this year's third installment of the E-Lounge as we pay homage to the late music superstar Riky Rick, popularly known for his hit songs like Boss Zonke, Sidlukotini, and many others. On the 23rd of February 2022, Riky Rick died from suicide, an event that has forever changed the life of his mother, Mama Louisa Zondo. Join us for a conversation on her book, Dearest MaRiky, A Mother's Journey Through Grief, Trauma, and Healing. This book is a testament to the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Mama Louisa Zondo is a lawyer and political activist who held several high-profile roles in her life. She has served as Deputy Executive Director of the Constitutional Assembly during South Africa's transition from apartheid, going on to become Chief Executive of the South African Human Rights Commission in 1996. She has subsequently held a number of senior roles in public and non-profit organizations, most recently acting as Executive Director of Oxfam South Africa. Mama Louisa tells the story of her life and the tragedy through a series of letters to a cherished and much-loved son, Riky Rick. She confronts her grief head-on, delving into the trauma of her past and finding the words to express the pain of losing her son. The E-Lounge is one of our knowledge share platforms. We do hope that you will tune in, you will take away the knowledge, and remember that those who desire to lead should read.
When I step out on stage in front of thousands of people, I don't feel that I'm being brave. It can take much more courage to express true feelings to one person. In spite of the risk, the courage to be honest and intimate opens up a world of self-discovery. It offers what we all want, the promise of love. My guest today has taken those famous words by the one and only Michael Jackson and put it down on paper. They have taken a harrowing story, personal harrowing story, and expressed it in a manner that, as I read, I kept on thinking creatively what would have taken for one person to express themselves so clearly about something as difficult as what they've gone through. My guest today has been many things. She has seen the birth of the Constitution of this country personally. She was there when it was all written down, it was all discussed. A hero of our own, a heroine of our own land. Somebody who's put on more than what we could ever imagine. Mama Louisa Zondo. To a lot of people, Riky Rick's mother. Welcome, Mama Louisa.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Tsepo. Thank you.
I don't even know where to start, but let's start in the beginning. Who is Mama Louisa Zondo? Before you were Riky Rick's mom.
Wow, that's not an easy question to answer in the time that we have. I basically don't have a real answer to that, but I've been everything. I've been a daughter, a sister, a mother to 4 that are biologically from me. I am a friend to many friends from old, been a colleague to many, and a comrade, and a woman suffering with many other women, the things that women have got to overcome. And basically, I have had a life that has been blessed with many, many, many opportunities. You speak of some of them of significance. And I am almost 60 years old and can sit and say, I lived through apartheid. I lived through the hopes of a new South Africa. I lived through the challenges and the madness of a nation, a world trying to survive. And it is madness because we keep on doing the same things that place us in the place of peril, and we say that we are trying to change. So I hope I have not disappointed you in answering it that way, because it's so complex.
It is a difficult conversation, and when one says who is one, and it's like, do you reflect on the sense of being, or do I reflect on the sense of doing? And most people explain themselves through their career and everything else. A very resilient woman, and I'll tell you my story one day about me and where you come from. Mm-hmm. You're from Gamashu. That's the proper way of calling it.
You see, when you call it like that, then I know you know what you're talking about.
You're from Gamashu.
Gamashu. People will say Gamashu,
no,
but it is Gamashu. That's where I come from. It's Ngawin. This is, that's the place that...
One day when I tell my story, I'll have to tell the story of my first job, my first project, my first site meeting. Yeah. I was robbed Gamash. So, but that's a story for another day. I know Gamash. I know it cleanly. I know it well. I know... but I tell that story because I want to tell the story about, your humble beginnings, your childhood, and the protective parents that had house rules that were very exact. Yeah. Yeah. And when I read through that and remembering my own experience and what happened to me on that particular project, I thought, well, I wish I had those kind of parents that wouldn't allow me to go and play around in Guamachu.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing. And what is interesting is that I discover, as I put this out and say I lived in a home that had such strict rules, that they were to the minutest aspect of life, and they regulated everything. I find that many today say, but this is exactly what was happening in my home. We had this very regulated home, and we had to be within the structures of those rules and principles. And it's clear that this is a fear-based way of shaping life that comes from the very dangerous era that children were being raised. So parents were very minded to protect their children in those ways, and rules were the basis of just giving comfort that my family may be safe from a very dangerous environment, or dangerous environments that apartheid threw us into.
With that understanding of that, it's a reflective look back, and it's a beautiful reflective look back. You're very strong in talking about how parents relate back to their children. Beyond, the attempt to shelter somebody from the challenges that lie out there. What becomes the balance? I kept on thinking as I was reading, what becomes the balance between trying to, get the kids not to harm themselves by, just being out there, but yet at the same time allow them enough freedom to be able to discover the world?
I have come to believe that there is a balance. Okay. And I think the balance is brought to life by the courage to let go of some of the fear. And the reason I say this is because I have had the chance to look back at how my own parenting mirrored the way I was raised. Because I was the parent who, from the depth of my heart, wanted everything of the best for my children, wanted my children to thrive in all sorts of ways. And for most of my life, I was a single parent, or I viewed myself as a single parent, even when there was opportunity for me to co-parent, but I viewed myself as a single parent. And I carried this as a burden, which not only guided me to be active and to be aware and to provide and to nurture my children in a particular way, but I carried it as a burden which drove me to control my environment, to control what resources I have, to control what the children are doing and how, to control where they are and how they behave. Even though my reflection later on is telling me this, at the time, I was not even aware. I was not even aware that that is what I was doing. I was bringing out a really, really controlled family, which meant communication was not true, real, was not even present. Communication was on my terms and on based on the things that I was comfortable with. I did not have the capacity to go into the spaces of looking at what is going on with us. What are the sensitivities that are arising from anything? You'll see from the book that my life was full of movement. It was so transient. It was 2 months here, 3 months there, a year there, all over. Such that Ricardo is the first person actually in an interview who made me aware that by the time he completed primary school, just primary school, he had been through more than 6 schools in more than 3 cities and 2 continents. And that must mean something. But for me, it was not something that I was aware of as an area of engagement. But it had a real impact on my children's lives. It had a real impact. There was the goodness of exposure to so many opportunities, but there was also the challenge of learning that nothing of value stays. Change means I lose all the time. I lose everything that comes into my life that I want to treasure, I want to enjoy, I want to hold on to. So that was also a lesson. But if communication and comfort with unknown engagements was something that I had instilled in my approach to life, I probably would have had the opportunity to sit down with my children when plans were coming up and engaged with what is coming up. What would it mean for you? How would you navigate? What would you need for support? Are you excited about it? What would make you excited? You know, just get people involved in an engagement that is of significance. So I am saying it is possible to find that balance It's possible to find it when we are in a place of less constriction, fear, and control. When we are open to allowing things to come up and subjects that we know nothing about to be before us and to work with them and to listen to the children. This attitude that I'm the adult, I must guide, I must know, I must provide, is very oppressive.
But Mama, let me ask an important question. And that as you're speaking, I'm going, but we're a product of a transient time. We're a product of an exciting time when South Africa was going to go through an interesting period. We are a product of hope. And in that hope and in the hope of building a better land, we lost our kids behind. We left our kids behind. And that's, you know, as I look back at it and I'm going, we are repeating the same mistakes. In the attempt to rebuild this country now, we are making the same mistake. How do we create that cutoff? How do we cut the cycle?
Yeah, I think it is about that. It is about that vulnerability. Once we're able to say, there are many, many, many things to be done. What is the healthiest state of being which enables these things to be done, causing the least harm possible? Then we are allowing ourselves to go into troubles, but that's good trouble. That's good trouble because we will encounter things that will not be easy to engage with, but the children, when we allow ourselves to engage with them, we allow ourselves to not know everything and just leave that room that they may contribute something that our own experiences may not have allowed us to be in touch with. They may bring that into their consideration. So it is about that vulnerability. It is about that allowing the fear to just rest. Let's just pause the fear and speak then in greater honesty to the realities that we don't know everything. We know that we have a sense of where things must go or might go, but let's allow ourselves to bring our children into what is happening in life. Of course, we have to be also adult in that we should be aware of what's harmful. Therefore, some boundaries, even appropriate ways of communicating difficult and challenging issues and having those conversations with our children. We should allow ourselves to learn even that. But for me, I truly believe, Tsepo, that there is a way of doing anew, being more generative in the ways in which we handle life and bringing in our children such that we start building deeper mental health and well-being for them.
But that requires us to do something else. And this is what you do in the book. In your book, you explain something that I've wondered about for such a long time. What was in Inanda Seminary that actually created so many leaders? And in a reflective manner in your book, you tell of the change of, what do they call it, of the leadership of the school that led to you guys not doing very well in your, what do they call it, in your matric exam. Tell us a little bit more about the environment at Inanda Seminary before that change occurred, because to me you answered a long question that I had held of, but what used to be in this school that we need to replicate that actually created so many national leaders? Because just about everybody who I meet in boardrooms, at some point in time, if they are from KZN, then I know they must have gone to Inanda.
I'm feeling a little sad. Tsepo, as you answer that question, because immediately it goes to something which is a sadness, a deep sadness, that I, like many other parents, came to believe that the best education for my children would be the education they would get from the private schools that we have in our system of education. And that is sad because there are many contradictions in it. Ne? There are many contradictions in it. But the deepest challenge for me about that process of me taking my children and throwing them into those environments was that I did not give them the protection, the armament that makes them go into an environment like that and know that they are African, they are precious, they are talented, they are full of uniqueness and beauty and everything that the world needs, that they have a place, a belonging, and that's what they are going to give to this community that they are going into. What then happens with the children that go in there in many instances is that they get into environments that just don't feel right. And they don't have the language, the tools to articulate what this not rightness is about. And they are just subjected to a constant breaking of spirit. And we lose them there.
And Mama, we repeat the mistake every time. It's you were sent to boarding school, then Ricardo was sent to boarding school, and when he said, I'm not okay, but I'm coping, I want to make it, I don't want to be a failure. And it just, you know, as you speak about it, is that the language to say what is not right, because they don't have the language, they cannot explain. Now of lately, after a lot of exposés of a lot of these schools, we now know what is not right.
Yeah, it's a sense of belonging. So at Inanda Seminary, the environment that we went into was that of calling on each one of us to recognize our value. You know, there was this mantra meant a lot. The school's motto, shine where you are. The shining. Each one of us carried that message from that young age. Some started at the age of 11. I started at the age of 12. From that early age, you heard the message, even though it was competing with other realities, but you did have the message that says, there's light in you, so you can shine. You can shine where you are. And you looked back and you saw examples of women that were shining at that time. They were Inanda girls. They had been there. I'm not saying it's absolutely perfect, but I'm saying there is a particular deliberate message that was delivered to those black girls in that environment, in that schooling environment, which was, you belong, you are amazing, you are powerful, you are light, you are stars, you can shine, and you must shine where you are. And so that's the kind of environment. And it was not only in Inanda Seminary. There are many African schools that gave the African child that message. So if we can refocus the way in which we are seeking to bring about the change, and we say, how do we allow ourselves to bring out in our children and in ourselves as well who we truly are. And with that, we will be able to embrace everybody and allow them also to be themselves and not be tortured by this requirement to fit into cultures that we don't fit into.
In addition to the friend we share, there's other two things that me and you share. Being rejected from Natal and returning there for a second qualification day. And you get rejected. So in under seminary, you finish your high school and you wanted to be a lawyer, and you made it when you wrote the letter for your interview that you wanted to be a lawyer. Now you want to be a lawyer, and Natal. And I keep on, when I read through a lot of these books from a lot of the leaders of our time, or from when they talk about the time when you had to write to the Minister of Interior to allow you to go and study at university. I thought my experience of being not allowed because of whatever the reason it was back then in 92 at that point in time. But when it happened to me, and I reflected when I looked back at it, and but you made the most of it. You were sent to Tefloop, hundreds of kilometers away from home on a train. Must have been an interesting journey because you were with a lot of the people that you had grown up with in under seminar. But what does that do to you as a person in terms of your emotions, and that ultimately later on you transfer to your relationship with your kids?
I'm surprised that in 1992, you still needed permission to go into
You didn't need permission, but they had created new rules.
New rules.
They had created quotas.
Yes,
they had created quotas. So I arrived and I was told, no, you've got the the quota is filled.
Yeah.
You've got the right marks, you've got the right metric and everything else, but we have enough black people. That's what they said to me.
Yeah. So Tefloop was an adventure actually. In our young age, 16, 17 to 18 years old, we thought it was just such an adventure now to be getting onto this train. For most of us, it was the first time going on a train for a long distance ride. The only train ride I knew was from Kwamashu to town. And now this is days on the train. It was adventure. And then we had also been told that Tefloop was very different from other universities, which did still have control. In Tefloop, you're absolutely free. You get there, no rules, and we were looking forward to the adventure. So it was good for the young souls that we were. But what shaped me in Tefloop was that quick realization that because I had, even when I'm free and happy with my friends, there was always something around me which send me back into a box. So send me back into that space. And so I found myself as one of the few who, within the first months of being at Tefloop, allowed herself to get into a relationship with I was going to say boy, but I must say an older man. So I did that. And I did that with this skewed way of looking at life, which was about almost negating myself. And there's a story there which I'm sure you don't want me to talk about here because you want the readers to go into it themselves.
No, you can go into it, Mama.
And explore where it takes them. Yeah. There's a story there about how the first sexual encounter for me at university was absolute trouble. It was absolute trouble. I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't share it with my friends. I couldn't bring them in. And I wrote a letter to my mother to let her know.
That was quite a story, and I couldn't imagine that letter. And, but your mother was gracious, and as resilient as she is, she just took it on in her stride and carried on with it.
And those are the contradictions where a big thing like that, which generally is regarded as taboo and, as something that is likely to cause explosion or even just, rupture in a relationship between a child and a parent, becomes something that I handle with that level of openness and reliance on the relationship of love between parent and myself. That's a contradiction which I found in my parenting as well, in that my children regarded me, and I learned this afterwards when we talk, they regarded me as stubborn, closed up, and just not available for everything to be communicated, just not communicative. They said, they tell me that I just don't talk about things that matter, that need to be talked about. I don't allow them the space to talk about that. And yet that was not the impression I had of myself. I thought I was open, liberal, progressive, allowing deep conversations that you generally would not find in a home between parents and children, allowing them to be on the surface. But it's about ways of being.
Going back to that, and for me, like it's I kept on, as I read, it's the paradoxes that lie in the book. You have parents that are trying to build what do they call it, a business, and yet at the same time as they're building their business, they're there well enough to have a pulse on what goes on in a home, that even when you had to go on your first date when you're still in high school, you had to tell your dad and speak to your mother about it. What is it that lies in that generation that they could actually be able to handle that much more, and that we have lost as we moved out of there, and we were never able to translate it into, now looking back in the book, the lessons are there, the insights are there, and they're clear, but what was lying in that generation in itself, that beyond their hard work, their families meant everything, and they still had their hand on everything that goes on in their homes? And what have we lost that we could actually bring back?
I don't necessarily believe that there is a thing that was easier, which was happening in those times, which we have lost. I do think that parenting in those times was as challenging as it is right now. And there would be, I'm telling my story. It was me there, and how I was impacted by growing up in a home which had those rules. And my story is different from my sister's stories. My elder sister has a completely different story of relating to the rules and how the parents related to her. My middle sister, an absolutely different story from both my elder sister and I. So I think there is that thing that we must bear in mind and not generalize around parenting. I'm talking, that story in Dearest MaRiky is covering me and my reactions, my responses, the way in which I took in the implications of my own environment. So I did allow myself to be an open book with my parents, which is not necessarily the case with my sisters. And that was for a reason. I needed to know that they are assured that I'm their beloved good one who is worthy of love and embrace, because I was doing all the things that they would have wanted their child to do. So that's one thing. I was an open book for the reason of getting the assurances that my parents were fine with me. And growing up now and looking at how my children respond to me as a mother in the earlier years before we got to the state where the book is out and we're looking anew at life, I find that they reacted to me in different ways as well. Example, at a point where I have been shattered by the realization that I have to take my son into rehab. My whole outlook to parenting now is impacted by this realization that there are drugs which crumble the lives of young people and my children. And so son number 3, who is still at high school, is experiencing a fear-based approach of parenting that is coming from me, and he has to rebel. He has to go to the extreme to avoid the implications of being suppressed by this parent now who is so frightened by drugs. Can you imagine that?
No, I can. I've got a son who's just gone to university now. It scares the heck out of me.
Absolutely. I don't imagine that parents in my own parents' era who were dealing with addiction would not have responded almost in the same way as I responded. And I think they would have had the same type of a challenge with navigating what it means to be a present parent, supportive parent, in light of the devastation of drugs, which has now come into your own home.
Mama, there's a lot that people need to read through this book and the detail, but there is an incident where just before you leave for London, and I want to go back to that incident because you repeated time and again in the book the need for one to heal after something happens, and I think as what they call it, and as a nation, and it's got nothing to do with our blackness. It's as a nation, the need to heal before you move on and get on with what they call it, with the next chapter of your life, and bottling things in, and which then creates a detachment from other people. Let's talk about that incident and how you react to it, and then you carry it through in your into your parenting in whatever form.
It's true. We really, really have to be aware of the things that we must heal from. And that has to do with this element of being really mindful about where we are, what is happening, allowing our bodies even to tell us, give us the intelligence about what we are really going through. And in order for us to be in more stable mental states, to continue being gentle, loving, wise, courageous, vulnerable, connected human beings, and to handle the things of life from that place. So, the incident that you talk about taught me one thing that's very clear to me even today. Our jails are filled with people who have been convicted of crimes. I could have been one of those because things just turned on one night and I stabbed a man. And what that means is that I could no longer say that I'm not a violent person. I could no longer say that it's beyond me to kill. It's circumstances and reaction to circumstances that could lead to that disaster. But at that time, I was not able to fully go into what had happened. I did not. It was all the Sunday. There is the conflict, there is the violence, there is the stabbing. The Monday, I go back home to tell my mother what happened overnight. The Tuesday, there are arrangements being made for me to quickly go out and go to my program. The Friday, I am on the flight and I am landing in UK, in London. The opportunity to just sit, to understand what has happened, how it impacts on me. I am leaving a child who has just turned 1 year and another who was just 5. I am leaving them behind and I'm going away for a year. And it's rushed. I have not set myself down to understand what is happening. There is something of a freedom though, because I'm breaking away from a trauma that has just happened. That's real. I'm breaking away from a trauma. I'm going into a new space. But the meaning of all of that, it's not even something that anybody sat me down and just asked me to do a little debriefing, preparation for me to move forward with lessons from this, deep lessons from that. And for me to hold myself with care as I go on with life from this trauma. It just became something which was one of the boxes, closed, and that's how I pursued life. Many boxes, closed with issues. They must just remain closed, and I can cope with life and move on.
But that transfers to the children in a great deal. I mean, when Riky was acting out and eventually he ended up on drugs, and you find out that there's the drugs, and again you go into solution mode. Yeah. And remind me of the passage from your Pastor Molo. He said something profound.
Yes.
He said, what does your children need? The only thing that they need from you.
Yeah. Yes. So that's another big blessing, to have people who help you in life, help you to make sense of what is going on, help you to get meaning from things that are disastrous, traumatic. And so for me, church and my leaders in church have always been that anchor. So my reverend was the first person that I call when Ricardo tells me that, yes, he is on drugs. And I'm not too far away, but I'm not at home. We're talking on the phone when I get this news. So I call my minister and I tell him, I feel like I'm naked completely. Ricardo has just told me this. And he hears me through and he gives me a piece of advice that I held on to right through. Because he tells me that, right now, your child is in a very, very difficult place. They are unable to love themselves. They are unable to even forgive themselves for the state that they have put themselves in. They have nothing to hold on to. The only thing that they are hoping for is that you still love them. And when they look at you and they look in your eyes, you better have love for that child, because that's the only thing they will hold on to. They are looking to see that no matter how disastrous their state is right now, they still have love in you as a parent. And I thought that was really, really important advice, which I have carried through to try and keep the love pure, keep the love unconditional, keep the love protected, and allow it to shine through even when we are dealing with really, really, really bad circumstances.
Riky makes it through all of that and produces some of the most beautiful music we've ever heard and this land has made. He goes through his own challenges, goes to the US, comes back and discovers himself and creates beautiful music. And ultimately goes into activism, which I love as a term. The being an activist in art world. But in essence, the hate that lies there, and the issue of his father and not being with his father, and a lot more other things, does not go away. And the complexity of not belonging anywhere. The gift that you had given now is now, the gift of being a world citizen now is now getting to a point where it's creating challenges in itself.
That's true.
How do we reconcile that? I mean, many times I thought I'm going to pick up my things and do what I normally do personally, go and live in another country, and I've done it before, so I can do it again, and it's natural to us to do it. It was a world where that was open to us, and we were getting on with it, but it's not as simple as that. How do we find the balance between creating a world where your children can learn a lot and be world citizens, but yet at the same time have a world in which they belong?
So what you're talking about, just picking up on the snippets of the challenges in Ricardo's life, is all true, but it's compounded in its devastating capabilities by the fact that he does not have a story that helps him to hold all those things, that helps him to understand all those things, that helps him to thrive even with all those things that may have been setbacks, unpleasant, and so on. He doesn't have the story. And that's what he's asking for. He asks me questions. He wants to know about aspects of my life, which would have given him some sense, some understanding of why life was like that. And I hear that, and I believe it's valid, and I really want to tell him the stories. And I even promise him at some point that I will write letters to him which tell the story of my life, because that's really, these are the things that are missing for him. He hasn't had the opportunity to get the story from the father, and the father is now passed away. And I'm not talking about the story of my life, and I'm not giving him any understanding. But I'm unable to write even these letters. I try, but I'm just not able to. And what does it work out to? It works out to this reality that even though I knew, for a long time, I knew that the telling of my story actually would contribute to a lot of healing, because I am aware of that there's a lot of damage in my life, and I'm aware that I'm boxing things in and hoping that everything keeps the boxes properly closed and nothing flares out, né? And life becomes manageable in that way. I'm hoping for that. But I'm not aware that I can't even tell the story to myself, and I don't know why. but I can't tell the story of my life to myself. It's only afterwards, after Ricardo's passing, after a lot of in-depth therapy, an inner journey that was so challenging, so hard for me, but that I'm grateful I went into, that I realized that I was going to be unable to tell my story because I was harboring the most devastating trauma. And then it closed the possibilities out completely. And that's the big lesson for all of us.
Riky passes away. You had a journey scheduled to go to the mountain, to Mount Everest, and to go to base camp, and you make it. The day before you leave, the email, whether scheduled or unscheduled, arrives wishing you well on your trip, and all of that. But when you come back, you get a chance to learn from younger people. Your daughter-in-law, or your daughter, there's no such a thing as a daughter-in-law in African culture, is now the one that's teaching you that every time you spike back into that negative mood. How important is it that we allow kids to teach us?
I love to say and mean it that all my children were most profound teachers to me. I said it in my tribute to Ricardo at his funeral that he taught me. I said it as I was writing from that trek up Mount Everest, that I'm grateful that he taught me so much. And the lessons from my children are in the main lessons in authenticity, in vulnerability, lessons in forgiveness, in deep unconditional love. And it's so important to realize that these are things that we in our adulthood become less wired to be attuned to. We are less wired to be connected to our vulnerability, our plaintive, unconditional love, just love like that. But children are more exposed to connection, direct connection to those valuable ways of being. And so it's so important for us to learn, to learn how to be teachable.
Powerful message. In your son's passing, you get to discover how much he was doing. And it wasn't a need to belong, but it was more he was a world citizen. A man who had decided that because I cannot tell the story, my story, I can be able to help others to tell their story and find their own world. What message would you be able to say? Everything as, you look at it, and hindsight is 20/20 vision. But as you look at it now, the one key message that you could always leave with anybody, from the learnings of discovering what your son was doing.
Even today, I still feel like completely in awe when I get to be told stories of different people's encounters with Ricardo, how he would have impacted their lives. And I still I still am so deeply grateful that he has left us with that gift of the love connection to so many. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that. And the message that I probably would want to leave for myself and for others is from him directly. He came back from one interview which he was doing for his work and connection to the African Bank. It was an interview with Dr. Sam Mutswenyan, and he told a story that he had heard from him about the importance of living life from that understanding that at all times we just need to leave a little room in our hearts for the next person, whatever that translates to. But stepping into life with that awareness that I should be leaving a little room in my heart for the next person. That's powerful. And that's a lesson from him. And I'd love us to keep on reminding ourselves in everything that we are engaged in of that lesson.
Mama Louisa tells me and tells you in the book, tell your story. Tell your story to your children so that they can find identity and not go look for it out there. Tell your story so that there should not be any wonder of whether or not you have put in enough to get them to where they are. Telling your story is a powerful manner in which you can always be able to relate. Be able to find a way of accessing your children and your children accessing you. From me, Stolo Samatebele Mopulana, Letebele Kwankwa, Mutuaro Troga Homuaja Mutu, Mutukwa, Mutuapogoya now. I'd like to thank you, Mama Louisa. And thank you for allowing yourself to tell your story so that we in the future can tell our own story and not leave it until late. In the famous words of one of the last songs that Boam Sanda, Bo Makado, Riky Rick, Makado wrote, keep shining. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for telling your story so cryptically in Lezos Bongo Zagun. In saying who you are, you tell a very emotional and meaningful story. Thank you very much. The Riky Rick Foundation is launched, and we are really hopeful that it will be a place where the legacy of Riky grows and grows, and we reach out in love and care. Thank you.
Thank you.